My son was standing in front of me with the papers in his hand. He was waving them near my face as if they were the definitive proof of his victory. His gaze was fixed on this downtown house, the house I inherited so many years ago, long before he was born. Emily, my daughter-in-law, as in my nuera, had already arrived with her things ready to move in. She had left them next to the door as if everything were decided, as if my opinion did not matter, as if I were merely an obstacle they had to remove to take what they believed was theirs. But as soon as the judge spoke in that courtroom, my son froze. He was speechless. And everything he had planned with such arrogance crumbled before his eyes. My name is Martha Johnson, and I am 69 years old. All my life I learned that people show their true colours when they think they have power in their hands. And that Tuesday afternoon, when David walked through the door of my house, I realized that my own son had become someone unrecognizable. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I was in the kitchen cleaning the table after lunch when I heard his firm footsteps crossing the living room. He did not knock on the door. He did not say hello. He simply walked in as if this place already belonged entirely to him. He dropped a folder onto the dining table with a dry thud. The sound echoed throughout the house. I stood still, the dishcloth still in my hands, watching him from the doorframe. David is 43 years old. He is my only son. I raised him alone after his father passed away when he was only 12 years old. I worked wherever I could to give him an education, clothes, and food. I sacrificed my own dreams so that he could study and have a better life than mine. But the man standing in front of me that day was not the boy I once held. He was someone different, someone with hard eyes and a mouth pressed into a cold line. He opened the folder without looking at me. He took out several papers and spread them on the table as if he were closing a business deal. "Mum, I need you to sign this today," he said. "We can't keep waiting." His voice was firm, authoritative. There was no doubt or hesitation. He spoke as if I were an employee who had to obey orders. I approached slowly. I dried my hands with the cloth and left it on the back of a chair. I looked at the papers without touching them. They were legal documents, property transfer forms. My house. The house where I had lived for more than 40 years. The house I inherited from my parents when they passed away. "What is this, David?" It was not a question. It was a calm affirmation. I already knew what it was, but I wanted to hear him say it. "It's the transfer of the house," he said. "I have a right to half because I'm your heir. That's how the law works, Mum. I'm not doing anything wrong. I'm just claiming what's mine." He spoke with such certainty that anyone would have believed he was right. But I remained silent. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I simply watched him with the same calm I had learned to maintain during all these years of solitude. Emily appeared in the doorway of the living room at that moment. My daughter-in-law. A woman of 38 years old with her hair tied back and a smile that did not reach her eyes. She was carrying a large bag in each hand. Clothes, personal items, everything ready to move in. "We already talked about this, Martha," she said. "It's what's best for everyone. You don't need so much space. We do. We have plans. We want to grow. This house is in a very good area downtown. We can sell it, and we all win." She spoke as if I were an elderly woman with no judgment, as if my life and my decisions had no value whatsoever. I did not respond. I stood next to the table, my hands crossed in front of me, watching both of them in silence. That silence made them uncomfortable. I saw it on their faces. They expected shouting. They expected tears. They expected me to break down. But I did not. David sighed impatiently. He took a pen from his shirt pocket and placed it on the papers. "Sign here, Mom," he said. "Don't complicate things. This is already decided. I talked to a lawyer. I have a legal right to half of this property. If you don't sign now, we're going to have to go to court, and there you're going to lose time and money. Better do it the easy way." His words sounded rehearsed, as if he had repeated them in front of a mirror, as if he had planned every detail of this conversation. Emily nodded next to him. She left the bags on the floor and crossed her arms with a look of smugness. "Martha, be reasonable," she said. "You're not young anymore. Living alone in such a big house makes no sense. We can take care of you. But we need you to cooperate." Taking care of me. Those words resonated in my mind like a mockery. They had not come to visit me in years. They had not asked how I was in years. And now they were talking about taking care of me. I still did not answer. I picked up the pen David had left on the table. I looked at it for a moment. Then I placed it back on the papers without signing anything. "I need time to think," I said. My voice was soft, calm, without visible emotions, but firm. David clenched his jaw. His eyes darkened with frustration. "There's nothing to think about, Mom," he said. "You either sign today or I'll see you in court. And I assure you, you won't win there. The law favors me. I'm your direct heir. I have a right to this property." Emily moved closer. Her tone changed. It became harsher. "Don't be stubborn, Martha," she snapped. "This is going to happen anyway. If you do it now, at least you avoid problems. If you force us to go to trial, everything is going to get complicated. And you're going to look like the bad guy in the story." The bad guy in the story. Me, who had raised that man alone. Me, who had worked until exhaustion so he could have a future. Me, who never denied him anything. But I did not say any of that. There was no need. People who act out of greed do not listen to reason. They only hear what they want to hear. I turned around and walked toward the kitchen. I left the papers on the table. I left David and Emily standing in the living room with their plans and their arrogance. I heard David let out an angry sigh behind me. "Fine, Mom," he said. "If you want to make it difficult, we'll make it difficult. But don't say I didn't warn you." They left the house, slamming the door. The silence returned. But this time it was different. It was a silence charged with something they could not see. Something I was carefully guarding. And that was soon going to change everything, because my son thought he had the law on his side. He thought this house was his by right. He thought I was a naive old woman who was going to give in to his pressure. But he did not know something fundamental, something I had kept silent about all these years. And when the time came to reveal it, his entire world was going to collapse before his eyes. The days that followed were strange. David did not return immediately, but I knew he was planning his next move. I knew him too well. When he got something in his head, he would not rest until he got it. And this time, what he wanted was my house. I continued with my routine as always. I got up early, made my coffee, watered the plants in the yard, and cleaned the rooms. This house was big for one person. That was true. But it was mine. Every corner held memories. Every wall had a story. I had inherited it from my parents when they passed away. That was more than 40 years ago, long before I married David's father, long before my son was born. This property was always mine, only mine. But David did not know that, or perhaps he knew and chose to ignore it. To him, I was his mother, and everything I had should be his too. That was how simple his logic was. On Thursday morning, 3 days after his first visit, he showed up again. This time he brought Emily with him. They walked in without knocking, just like before. I was in the dining room folding clean laundry when I heard their voices in the living room. "Mom, we need to talk." David's voice sounded more controlled than the last time, more calculated. He had rehearsed what he was going to say. I took my time. I finished folding the last shirt, placed it on the pile, and walked into the living room. They were standing next to the sofa. David had another folder in his hands. Emily looked at him with a smile that pretended to be kind, but only showed impatience. "Good morning." My greeting was simple, neutral, without emotions. David nodded slightly. He opened the folder and took out more papers. He spread them on the coffee table, as if he were presenting a business project. "I spoke with my lawyer," he said. "Mum, he confirmed what I already told you. As an only child, I have a right to half of your assets. That includes this house. I'm not making anything up. It's the law. If you don't want to sign, we're going to have to go to court. And believe me, the judge will decide the same thing there. It's better to avoid all that process." He spoke with such certainty that anyone would have thought he was a legal expert. But I knew the truth. I knew he had only consulted enough to convince himself he was right. He had not investigated thoroughly. He had not asked the right questions. Emily sat down on the sofa and crossed her legs. She looked around the living room as if she were already measuring the spaces for her own furniture. "Martha, I understand this is difficult for you," she said, "but think about it. We can give you a good life. We're going to sell this house, and with that money we all benefit. You can rent a smaller, more comfortable apartment. You won't have to worry about maintaining such a large place, and we'll finally be able to move forward with our plans." Her words sounded so well rehearsed, as if they had practiced together what they were going to tell me, as if I were an obstacle in a business negotiation. I sat down in the armchair facing them. I crossed my hands in my lap and watched them in silence. That silence made them uncomfortable. I saw it in their gestures, in the way David drummed his fingers on the folder, in the way Emily nervously moved her foot. "How much do you think the house is worth?" My question took them by surprise. David blinked. Emily straightened her back. "Well, we made some inquiries," David said. "A property like this, downtown, can be worth between $150,000 and $200,000. It depends on the market, but it's a good amount. Mum, we can do a lot with that." David spoke with enthusiasm now. His eyes shone when he mentioned the money. It was as if he already had it in his hands. "And what would you do with my share?" Another calm question. No accusations. Just apparent curiosity. Emily leaned forward. Her tone became softer, more manipulative. "Martha, you would have your share, of course. $75,000 is enough for you to live comfortably the rest of your life. You could rent a nice place, buy what you need, even travel if you want. You wouldn't have to worry about anything." $75,000. Half of what they calculated my house was worth. My house. The one I had inherited. The one I had maintained for decades. The one I had cared for with my own hands. "And what would you do with your share?" David settled back on the sofa. His posture was more relaxed now. He thought I was giving in. "We have plans, Mom," he said. "We want to invest, open a business, maybe buy another property in a better area. Emily and I have been waiting for an opportunity like this for years, and this house is that opportunity." An opportunity. That is what they called trying to strip me of what was mine. An opportunity. Emily nodded vigorously. "Exactly. And it's not just for us, Martha. We're also thinking about the future. We want to have children someday. We need financial stability for that. This house would give us that boost we need. Children. They were talking about having children while planning to leave me homeless. And while they talked, I watched. I watched how they looked at each other with complicity. I watched how they had already decided everything without really consulting me. David took a pen from his pocket and placed it on the papers again. "Mum, I know this is hard," he said, "but it's the best thing. Sign today and tomorrow we'll start the process. Everything will be ready in a few months. You'll see it was the right decision." His tone was almost paternal now, as if he were the responsible adult and I were the child who needed guidance. I looked at the pen, then I looked at the papers, then I looked at my son, at that man who was once a small child who cried in my arms when he had nightmares, at that boy who told me he loved me before going to sleep, at that boy who promised to take care of me when he grew up. Where had that boy gone when he became this? "I need to consult with someone before signing," I said. My voice was still calm, firm, but soft. David frowned. "Consult with who, Mum?" he asked. "I already told you I spoke with a lawyer. He confirmed everything. You don't need to consult with anyone else." "Even so, I want to," I said. "It's my right." The word right echoed in the room. David clenched his jaw. Emily stopped smiling. "Fine," David said. "Consult with whoever you want, but don't take too long. We've already lost too much time with this." They stood up. David picked up the folder with a brusque gesture. Emily grabbed her purse and looked at me with a mixture of frustration and disdain. "We hope you're reasonable, Martha," she said. "We don't want to have to do this through legal channels, but if you don't leave us another option, we will." They left the house without saying goodbye. The door slam echoed again, and once again, I was alone in the silence of my home. But this time, that silence did not scare me. On the contrary, it gave me clarity. It gave me strength, because I knew something they ignored, and that knowledge was my shield. That same afternoon, I called Elizabeth Davis. Elizabeth was my neighbor for 15 years, a woman of 64 years old who had worked all her life in legal offices. She understood the law. She knew how these things worked. We agreed to meet the next day at her house. I brought all the documents I had saved, the papers from my parents' inheritance, the property deeds, everything that proved this house was mine from long before I got married. Elizabeth reviewed every document carefully. She read every line, every date, every signature. And when she finished, she looked up at me with a serious but reassuring expression. "Martha, your son is completely wrong," she said. "This house is yours, only yours. You inherited it before you got married. That means it is not part of the community property. Your husband never had rights over it, and your son does not have them now either. He cannot claim anything." Her words were like a relief. Although I already knew it deep down, hearing it from someone who understood the law gave me renewed certainty. "What should I do then?" I asked. Elizabeth took my hand. "Don't sign anything. If he insists on taking you to court, go. Take these documents. Any judge will see the truth immediately. Your son is going to lose, and he is going to be exposed in front of everyone." I nodded slowly. I put the papers in my purse and said goodbye to Elizabeth with a hug. I returned home with a lighter heart, with the certainty that what was coming would not scare me, because David thought he had the power. He thought he was right. He thought I was a weak old woman who would give in to his pressure. But he was soon going to discover that he was very wrong. 1 week after my conversation with Elizabeth, David showed up again. This time he did not come only with Emily. He also brought a man whom he introduced as his lawyer, a guy about 50 years old, grey suit, leather briefcase, and an expression of superiority that bothered me from the first moment. The three of them walked into my living room as if it were an office. I was preparing dinner when I heard their voices. I turned off the stove, wiped my hands, and went out to greet them with the same calm as always. "Mum, this is Mr. Alan Miller," David said. "He's going to explain everything so you understand that we're not making anything up." David spoke with that tone of false authority he had adopted lately, as if having a lawyer by his side gave him more power. Mr. Miller extended his hand. I shook it briefly and invited them to sit down. They settled on the sofa. I sat across from them in my usual armchair. "Mrs. Johnson, your son hired me to advise him on this matter," Mr. Miller said. "And I must tell you that he is right. According to the Civil Code, children have the right to inherit their parents' assets. In this case, being an only child, David is entitled to half of this property. It is something established by law." The lawyer spoke with that professional certainty that intimidates many people. But I looked him directly in the eyes without blinking. "I inherited this house from my parents before I got married," I said. "It is not community property." My answer was direct. Without beating around the bush, Mr. Miller blinked. David shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "We would have to verify that, ma'am," Mr. Miller said. "But even so, you are still David's mother, and he is your direct heir. Eventually, this property will be his." Eventually. That word hung in the air like a veiled threat, as if they were waiting for me to die to take what was mine. Emily leaned forward. Her voice tried to sound sweet, but there was venom underneath. "Martha, no one is saying it's not your house, but you have to think about the future. What's going to happen when you're no longer here? All of this is going to be David's anyway. Why not make things easier now? We all win. You have money to live comfortably, and we can start our lives." There was something about the way she spoke that turned my stomach. That way of planning my death as if it were a pending formality, as if my existence were only a temporary inconvenience. David cleared his throat. "Mum, Mr. Miller can start the legal process if you don't cooperate," he said. "We can go to court and resolve this formally, but it's going to be more expensive, more complicated, and the result will be the same. We'd better do it the easy way." The lawyer nodded gravely. "That's right, Mrs. Johnson," he said. "A lawsuit can take months. You'll have to pay legal fees. You'll have to appear before a judge. It will be exhausting for you. My professional recommendation is that you sign the transfer documents. It's the most sensible thing to do." The most sensible thing? As if giving up my home were sensibility and not dispossession. I remained silent for a moment. I looked at the three of them. David, with that mixture of impatience and greed in his eyes. Emily with her false smile and her ambitious plans. The lawyer with his rehearsed speech and his air of bought authority. "I am not going to sign anything," I said. My voice was calm, but firm, like a rock that does not move. David stood up abruptly. "Then I'll see you in court, Mum," he said. "I warned you. You can do this the easy way or the hard way. You decide." Mr. Miller put his papers in his briefcase with professional calm. "Mrs. Johnson, I regret that you have made this decision," he said. "We are going to initiate the legal process. You will receive a notification in the coming days. I recommend that you seek legal representation as well." The three of them stood up. David looked at me with a mixture of disappointment and contained anger. "I hope this is worth it, Mum, because in the end you're going to lose anyway." They left my house, leaving a tense atmosphere. I remained seated in my armchair, looking at the closed door. But I did not feel fear. I did not feel doubt. I felt a strange clarity, a certainty that what was coming was necessary. That night I called Elizabeth again. I told her what had happened. She listened to everything attentively and then gave me clear advice. Martha, you need a lawyer too. You can't go to that court alone. I know someone good, someone honest who won't charge you more than necessary. His name is Robert Smith. I worked with him years ago. He's trustworthy. The next day I went to Mr. Robert Smith's office. It was a simple place without luxuries, on a second floor downtown. He received me kindly. He was a man about 60 years old, grey hair, reading glasses hanging from his neck. I explained the whole situation to him. I showed him the inheritance documents, the property deeds, everything that proved the house was mine from before the marriage. Robert Smith reviewed every paper carefully. He took notes, he asked questions. And when he finished, he leaned back in his chair with a reassuring smile. Mrs. Johnson, your case is very clear. This property is yours. You inherited it before you married. It is not community property. Your son has no legal right to it while you are alive, and when you pass away, he will be an heir. Yes, but right now he cannot claim anything. Your son's lawyer is wrong, or he is lying to collect fees. His words gave me profound peace, a confirmation of what I already knew, but needed to hear from an expert. What do I have to do? I asked. Nothing more than wait for the court notification. When it arrives, we will respond. We will present these documents, and the judge will dismiss the case immediately. Your son will lose, and he will be exposed. I thanked Mr. Smith and left his office with a lighter heart. I returned home and continued with my life as always, cooking, cleaning, watering the plants, waiting. Meanwhile, David and Emily continued with their plans. I knew because Elizabeth told me she had seen them walking around the neighborhood with a real estate agent. They were appraising properties. They were calculating prices. They were mentally spending the money they thought they had secured. One afternoon, 2 weeks after the lawyer's visit, the official notification arrived. A large envelope with civil court stamps. I opened it calmly and read the contents. It was David's formal lawsuit. He was claiming his right to half of the property. He was requesting that a judge order the division or sale of the property. I took the document to Mr. Smith. He read it and prepared the response. A simple but forceful response. We attached all the documents proving that the house was mine by premarital inheritance, that it could not be claimed by anyone while I was alive. The trial was scheduled for 3 weeks later, a Tuesday at 10 o'clock in the morning, courtroom 4 of the civil court. During those 3 weeks, David tried to contact me several times. Calls I did not answer. Messages I did not reply to. He even came to my house one more time. But I did not open the door. There was nothing to talk about with him. Everything would be resolved in court. Emily, for her part, had already started telling her friends that they would soon be moving to a house downtown, that they were going to sell the property and open a business, that they would finally have the life they deserved. I knew because one of her friends was Elizabeth's cousin. Rumors travel fast in the neighborhoods. David was so sure of his victory that he had even spoken with a real estate broker. He had calculated that the house could sell for $180,000, $90,000 for each of them. With that, he and Emily planned to buy a commercial space and open a clothing store. They had already visited several places. They had already done the math. All that certainty, all that arrogance, all that contempt toward me. It was going to crumble soon. The night before the trial, I carefully prepared my clothes. A simple but dignified dress, comfortable shoes, my purse with all the documents well organized. I was not nervous. I was not scared. I was ready. Elizabeth came to visit me that night. We drank tea in the kitchen and talked about simple things. She squeezed my hand before leaving. Everything is going to change tomorrow, Martha, she said. Your son is going to understand that he made a very big mistake, and you are going to regain your peace. I nodded in silence. She was right. Everything would change tomorrow. Tomorrow the truth would come to light. And tomorrow, David would discover that his mother was not the weak old woman he thought. The morning of the trial dawned clear. I got up early, as always. I prepared my coffee and sat by the kitchen window. I watched the sun illuminate the neighborhood streets as the world slowly woke up. There was a strange calm in me, a serenity that came from knowing that the truth was on my side. I dressed carefully. The dress I had chosen was a soft cream color, simple but elegant. I put my hair up in a low bun and put on the pearl earrings my mother had given me so many years ago. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman who had nothing to be ashamed of, a woman who had worked all her life, a woman who deserved respect. Mr. Robert Smith picked me up at 9 o'clock sharp. He arrived in his modest car and greeted me with a reassuring smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Johnson," he said. "Are you ready?" "Yes, Mr. Smith," I replied. "I'm ready." During the ride to the courthouse, he reviewed the main points of the case with me. He explained how the procedure would be. The judge would first hear the arguments of David and his lawyer, then she would hear ours. Then she would review the documents and make a decision. "Don't worry," he said. "Everything is very clear. The documents speak for themselves. Your son has no legal basis for his claim." I nodded in silence. I looked out the car window as the downtown streets passed before my eyes. This city had seen me grow up. It had seen me work. It had seen me raise my son alone after being widowed. And now it would see me defend what was mine. We arrived at the courthouse 10 minutes before the appointed time. It was an old 3-story building with long hallways and dark wooden doors. The smell of old paper and dampness filled the air. There were people waiting on benches in the hallway, some lawyers with their briefcases, some families with worried expressions. We went up to the second floor. Courtroom 4 was at the end of the corridor. There was a wooden bench outside where we could wait. I sat down with my hands on my purse, breathing calmly. And then I saw them arrive. David and Emily were walking down the hallway with Mr. Alan Miller. The three of them were formally dressed. David was wearing a dark suit that he had probably bought especially for the occasion. Emily was wearing a fitted dress and high heels. They looked more like they were going to a celebration than a trial. When David saw me, his expression changed. There was something in his eyes, a mixture of determination and something that almost seemed like sadness. But he quickly hardened. He approached with Emily and the lawyer behind him. "Good morning, Mom," he said. His greeting was formal, cold, as if I were a stranger. "Good morning," I replied. My response was just as neutral. There was no affection, no familiarity, just two people who were about to face a legal conflict. "You still have time to settle this out of court," David said. "We can talk to the judge and tell her we reached an agreement. We avoid this whole process." I shook my head gently. "No, David," I said. "Let the judge decide." He clenched his jaw. Emily looked at me with disdain and clung to David's arm as if showing her unconditional support. Mr. Miller was reviewing some papers with a professional expression, oblivious to the family tension. Minutes later, the courtroom door opened. A clerk poked her head out. "Case of Johnson versus Johnson. You may come in." We all entered the courtroom. It was a spacious room with light-coloured walls and a long table at the front where the judge was seated. A woman about 55 years old, short hair, rectangular glasses, and a serious but not hostile expression. She wore her judicial robe and had several documents in front of her. There were chairs for us on both sides of the room. David, Emily, and his lawyer sat on the right side. Mr. Smith and I sat on the left side. The distance between us seemed much greater than just a few feet. The judge lightly struck her gavel. "Good afternoon," she said. "I am Judge Elizabeth Turner, and I will be in charge of this case. I have reviewed the lawsuit filed by Mr. David Johnson against Mrs. Martha Johnson. We will proceed to hear the arguments of both parties. Mr. Miller, you may begin." David's lawyer stood up. He cleared his throat and began his presentation with that professional tone I was already familiar with. "Your Honor, my client, Mr. David Johnson, is the only child of Mrs. Martha Johnson. According to the Civil Code, children have the right to inherit their parents' assets. In this case, we are talking about a property located downtown, valued at approximately $180,000. My client requests that his right to half of said property be recognized, either through the division of the property or through the sale and equitable distribution of the amount obtained." The judge listened attentively, taking occasional notes. "Counselor, do you have knowledge of when and how Mrs. Johnson acquired this property?" she asked. The lawyer hesitated for a moment. He looked at his papers. "Well, Your Honor, we understand that the property has been in Mrs. Johnson's possession for many years. The specific details of the acquisition were not provided to my client." The judge raised an eyebrow. "You did not investigate the origin of the property before filing this lawsuit?" Mr. Miller shifted uncomfortably. "We proceeded from the premise that being the mother and being the only child, there is a hereditary right." The judge stared at him for a moment before speaking. "Counselor, does the hereditary right apply when the owner passes away?" "Not before. But let us continue. Do you have anything else to add?" The lawyer tried to regain his composure. "Yes, Your Honor. My client also argues that Mrs. Johnson is already elderly and that living alone in such a large property poses risks to her safety and well-being. We believe that a solution where she receives her financial share and can live in a more suitable place would be beneficial for everyone." I heard those words and felt a pang of indignation. They were using my age as an argument, as if being 69 years old made me incapable of deciding about my own life. The judge took notes again. Then she looked toward our table. "Mr. Smith, you may present your defense." Robert Smith stood up calmly. He opened his briefcase and took out the documents we had prepared. "Your Honor, the defense is very simple and is supported by official documents. The property in question was inherited by Mrs. Martha Johnson from her parents in the year 1982. This occurred 3 years before she married Mr. David Johnson's father. Therefore, this property is Mrs. Johnson's separate property. It is not community property. It is not part of any marital estate, and Mr. David Johnson has no right to it while his mother is alive." The silence that followed was heavy. I saw David stiffen in his chair, how Emily's eyes widened in surprise, how Mr. Miller paled slightly. The judge extended her hand. "May I see those documents?" Mr. Smith approached and handed her a folder. The judge began to review each paper carefully. The death certificate of my parents, the will where they left me the house, the property deed registered in my name, the marriage certificate that proved I married 3 years after inheriting. Several minutes passed in silence. Only the sound of the pages turning could be heard. David stared straight ahead with his jaw clenched. Emily whispered something in his ear, but he did not respond. Mr. Miller reviewed his own papers as if looking for something that could help. Finally, the judge looked up. Her expression was clear. "Mr. Miller, these documents demonstrate unequivocally that the property in question is Mrs. Johnson's separate property. It was acquired by inheritance before her marriage, according to the Civil Code, Property inherited or received by gift before marriage is not subject to divisions while the owner is alive. Your client has no legal right to this property at this time. David's lawyer tried to speak. But, Your Honor, eventually, the judge interrupted him firmly. Eventually, when Mrs. Johnson passes away, her son will inherit as appropriate. But that is not the case now. The lawsuit you filed lacks legal basis. You should have investigated the origin of the property before proceeding. David stood up abruptly. But my lawyer told me I had a right, he stammered. He told me the law favored me. The judge looked at him sternly. Mr. Johnson, your lawyer was mistaken, or he did not do his job correctly. The law is very clear in these cases. Property inherited before marriage is the exclusive property of the recipient. Your mother has no legal obligation to share or transfer this property. I saw how David's face changed. The certainty crumbled. The arrogance turned into confusion. The conviction transformed into disbelief. Emily had turned pale. Her plans, her dreams, everything she had imagined with the money from my house. Everything was collapsing at that moment. Judge Elizabeth Turner closed the document folder with a firm movement. The sound echoed in the room, like a final verdict. She looked directly at David, and her expression showed no sympathy whatsoever. Mr. Johnson, I want you to understand something very important. You tried to dispossess your mother of her property based on incorrect information. This is not only legally improper, but morally questionable. Your mother has every right to live in her house for as long as she decides, and you have no authority to pressure her in this manner. The judge's words fell on David like stones. I saw him shrink slightly in his chair. His face had lost all colour. Emily was next to him, completely motionless, her hands clenched in her lap. Mr. Miller tried to intervene once more, with a less confident voice than before. Your Honour, my client acted in good faith. He simply— The judge raised a hand, stopping him. Counsellor, your client hired your professional services. You had an obligation to investigate the facts before filing a baseless lawsuit. This could have been avoided with a simple review of the property documents. I hope you take this as a lesson for future cases. The lawyer bowed his head. It was evident that he knew he had made a serious mistake, a mistake that now exposed him in front of a judge and would likely affect his professional reputation. Judge Turner returned her attention to me. Her expression softened slightly. Mrs. Johnson, I regret that you have had to go through this situation. It is painful when family conflicts reach legal instances, but I want you to know that the law is on your side. This property is yours. No one can force you to transfer it, sell it, or share it unless you wish to do so. Thank you. Thank you, Your Honour, I said. My voice was calm. There was no triumph in it. There was no revenge. Only relief. The judge picked up her gavel and struck it on the table. Therefore, this court declares the lawsuit filed by Mr. David Johnson against Mrs. Martha Johnson to be legally improper. The case is closed. You may be excused. That final strike of the gavel was like thunder in the room. David remained petrified in his chair. His eyes were fixed on the judge, as if he could not process what he had just heard. As if he expected her to say that everything had been a mistake. But there was no mistake. There was no second chance. The judge was already organizing her documents for the next case. For her, this was over. It was just another case on her agenda. But for us, it was the breaking point of a family relationship. Mr. Smith stood up and helped me up. He squeezed my shoulder gently. Everything went well, Mrs. Johnson, he said. Let's go. We walked toward the exit of the courtroom. As we passed the table where David and Emily were, I felt my son's gaze on me. I stopped for a moment and looked at him. Our eyes met, and in that instant I saw something I had not seen before. I saw fear. I saw shame. I saw the realization of what he had done. But I did not say anything. There was nothing to say. Words were unnecessary after what had happened. I left the courtroom with Mr. Smith. We walked down the long hallway of the courthouse. We went down the stairs. And when we went out onto the street, I felt the fresh air on my face like a blessing. "Congratulations, Mrs. Johnson," Robert Smith said. Justice was served. He shook my hand with genuine respect. I thanked him for his work, and we said goodbye. He had other cases to attend to. I had a life to return to. I took a taxi back home. During the ride, I looked out the window in silence. The streets passed before my eyes, but my mind was elsewhere. I thought about David, about the child he had been, about the man he had become. Where had I gone wrong? At what point had I raised someone capable of trying to strip me of my home? Those questions hurt me more than the whole legal process. When I arrived at my house, I walked in and closed the door behind me. Silence greeted me. But this time it was not a heavy silence. It was a silence of peace, of closure. I sat down in the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea. I looked around my home. The walls I had painted years ago, the furniture I had chosen carefully, the photographs on the shelves. Everything was still mine. Everything was still in its place. But something had changed forever. The relationship with my son. That could not be repaired with a judicial verdict. That was broken in a much deeper way. That afternoon, Elizabeth came to visit me. She brought a pie she had baked to celebrate. "Martha, I'm so proud of you," she said. "You stood your ground. You didn't let them intimidate you." We sat in the kitchen and shared the pie with coffee. I told her every detail of the trial, how David had reacted, how the lawyer's face had looked when the judge explained his mistake, how Emily had been speechless with shock. Elizabeth listened attentively, nodding occasionally. "They thought they could take advantage of you because of your age," she said. "They thought you were an older woman with no resources or knowledge, but you showed them they were very wrong." "Yes," I said, "but I don't feel joy, Elizabeth. I feel sadness. He's my son. He's the person I raised. And now I don't know if I can ever look at him the same way again." My friend took my hand across the table. "A mother's love is strong, Martha," she said. "But you also have a right to feel pain. What he did was unforgivable. He tried to take your home from you. He tried to leave you with nothing. That's just not right, especially not to a mother who gave him everything." She was right. I knew it. But a mother's heart does not understand reasons. A mother's heart only hurts. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, David and Emily were facing their own reality. They arrived at their apartment in silence. Emily threw her purse onto the sofa with frustration. David stood in the middle of the living room as if lost. "I can't believe we lost," he mumbled. "The lawyer assured me we had the case won." His voice trembled with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Emily turned toward him, her eyes shining with fury. "We spent $2,000 on that useless lawyer," she spat. $2,000 we didn't have. And for what? To be ridiculed in front of a judge? For your mother to see us for what we are? Failures who tried to steal from her. "We weren't stealing," David insisted. "It was my right." David was trying to convince himself more than her. "You're right," Emily mocked. "You're right. You didn't have any right, David. The lawyer didn't even investigate correctly. And you believed him because you wanted to believe him, because you wanted that easy money, because you thought your mother was a silly old woman who would give in. Emily's words were like lashes. Each one left a mark. David collapsed onto the sofa and covered his face with his hands. "What am I going to do now?" he groaned. "I told everyone we were going to sell the house. I told the landlord we were about to close the deal on the commercial space. I made plans. I spent money I didn't have, assuming this was going to work." Emily looked at him with a mixture of contempt and disillusionment. "Well, now you'll have to explain to them that you were wrong," she said, "that your brilliant plan didn't work, that your mother turned out to be smarter than you." She went into the bedroom, slamming the door. David was left alone in the living room. The silence in his apartment was very different from the silence in my house. His was filled with failure, with shame, with consequences. The following days were strange for me. I went back to my usual routine: cooking, cleaning, watering the plants. But there was something different in the air, a feeling that one chapter had ended and another was beginning. David did not visit again. He did not call. He did not send messages. It was as if he had disappeared from my life. And although a part of me missed my son, another part appreciated the distance. I needed time to heal, to process everything that had happened. Elizabeth continued to visit me regularly. We drank tea. We talked about simple things. She never mentioned the trial unless I brought up the topic. She respected my need to move forward. One afternoon, while I was watering the flowers in the yard, I thought about everything that had happened. How it had started with documents on a table and had ended in a courtroom. How my son had tried to strip me of what was mine. How justice had prevailed. But I also thought about the price of that justice. The broken relationship, the lost trust, the love that now had deep cracks. It was worth it. I kept repeating to myself. It was worth defending what was mine. It was worth not giving in to the pressure. It was worth proving that a woman of 69 years old is not an easy victim. But it hurt. Despite everything, it hurt. 3 weeks passed since the trial. 3 weeks of silence from David. 3 weeks in which I continued my life with a calm that surprised even Elizabeth. She would come to visit me every couple of days and always ask me how I was feeling. I would answer her honestly. I felt at peace. Sad, yes, but at peace. One Saturday morning, while I was drinking coffee in the kitchen, the doorbell rang. I got up calmly and went to open it. I was not expecting anyone. When I opened the door, I was met with a surprise I had not anticipated. It was Emily, alone, without David. Her face was puffy, as if she had been crying recently. Her eyes were red, and she had an expression of desperation I had never seen on her before. "Martha, I need to talk to you," she pleaded. "Please." Her voice was different. It no longer had that arrogance. It no longer had that false confidence. It was the voice of someone who was on the verge of something. I hesitated for a moment, but finally I stepped aside and let her in. We walked to the living room. She sat on the edge of the sofa, nervous, wringing her hands in her lap. I sat in my armchair and waited for her to speak. "I don't know where to start," Emily said, looking at the floor. She could not hold my gaze. "Everything fell apart after the trial. Everything. David and I. We're no longer together. We separated a week ago." Those words took me by surprise. I did not expect that. But I did not say anything. I just waited for her to continue. "After losing the case, David changed," she said. "He became distant, bitter. He spent hours in silence. He didn't want to talk. He didn't want to do anything. And I I was furious. Furious because we had spent money we didn't have on a lawyer who turned out to be incompetent. Furious because we had made plans that were never going to come true. Furious because we looked like fools. She paused for a moment. She took a deep breath before continuing. We started fighting. Every day. About everything. I blamed him for being so naive. He told me I had pressured him, that it had all been my idea, that I was the one who wanted the money. And he was right. I wanted that money. I dreamed of that house. I was the one who convinced him to pressure you. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. She wiped them away with the back of her hand, but they kept falling. I lost my marriage because of greed, Martha, she confessed. Because of wanting something that wasn't ours. Because of believing we had a right to your house just because David was your son. And now I'm left with nothing. No husband, no house, no future. I looked at her in silence. There was something genuine in her pain, something real that I had not seen before. But even so, I did not feel pity. I felt a distant sadness, like when you see someone suffer who chose their own path. Why did you come to tell me this, Emily? I asked. She looked up. Her swollen eyes looked at me with desperation. Because I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for treating you like you didn't matter. I'm sorry for planning to take your home. I'm sorry for being so selfish. And I need you to talk to David. I need you to tell him that there's still a chance to fix things between you two, not between him and me. That's over, but between mother and son. I shook my head slowly. That's something David has to decide for himself. I can't force him to come. I can't force him to apologize. And frankly, Emily, I don't know if I'm ready to forgive. But he's your son. And he tried to take my house from me, I said. He tried to leave me with nothing. He used my age as an argument against me. He treated me like I was an obstacle in his way to money. That's not easily forgotten. My voice was firm, but not cruel, just honest. Emily lowered her head again. She stood up slowly. I understand, she said. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that David is sorry too, even if he doesn't have the courage to come and tell you. She walked toward the door. I accompanied her. Before leaving, she turned to me one last time. You were better to us than we deserved, Martha, she said. I hope you can find peace someday. She left. I watched her walk away down the street, her shoulders slumped and her steps slow. A woman who had lost everything because of ambition, because of wanting what was not hers. I closed the door and returned to my kitchen. The coffee had gone cold. I brewed a new cup and sat by the window. I thought about what Emily had said, that David was sorry, but did not have the courage to say it. Part of me wanted to believe her. I wanted to think that my son felt remorse, that he had learned something from all this. But another part of me doubted. I doubted whether the repentance was genuine, or if it was just the pain of failure. That afternoon, I called Elizabeth and told her about Emily's visit. My friend listened to everything attentively. And how do you feel after that conversation? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. Confused, I guess. Part of me wants to believe there's hope, that David can change, that we can repair what was broken. But another part of me knows that some things don't get repaired. Some wounds are too deep. Elizabeth sighed on the other end of the line. Only you can decide if you want to give him another chance, Martha, she said. But don't do it out of obligation. Don't do it because you're his mother and you feel like you have to. Do it only if you truly believe he has changed. And if you're not sure, it's okay to wait. It's okay to protect yourself. Her words gave me clarity. She was right. I did not have to rush to forgive. I did not have to pretend that everything was fine. I had a right to my pain. I had a right to my time. The days passed. Spring was arriving and the plants in my yard were starting to bloom. I spent the afternoons there, watering the flowers, pruning the dry branches, enjoying the sun. There was a strange peace in that routine, a sense that life continued despite everything. One afternoon, while I was in the yard, I heard someone knocking on the door. I went to open it, my hands still dirty with soil. When I opened it, my heart skipped a beat. It was David. He was standing on the threshold, his hands in his pockets and his gaze lowered. He looked thinner than the last time. He had dark circles under his eyes and a haggard face. It was evident that he had not been sleeping well. "Hello, Mum," he whispered. There was shame in every word. We stood in silence for a moment. I did not know what to say. He did not seem to know how to start either. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside without saying anything. He walked in slowly, as if afraid I would change my mind. We walked to the living room. I sat in my armchair. He remained standing, too nervous to sit down. "Emily came to see you, didn't she?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, a few days ago." He nodded too. He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "We broke up, she and I. Everything fell apart after the trial. We lost the money we paid the lawyer. We lost the plans we had. And when there was nothing left to lose, we lost each other." He paused. He took a deep breath before continuing. "Mum, I came to ask for your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve to be heard. I know I did something unforgivable. I tried to take your house. I tried to take advantage of you. I treated you like you didn't matter. And all for money, for greed, for wanting a life I hadn't earned." His voice broke. I saw his eyes well up. "I was a horrible son. I forgot everything you did for me. I forgot how you raised me alone after Dad died. I forgot all the sacrifices you made to give me a good life. And I repaid you with betrayal." Tears began to fall down his face, but he did nothing to hide them. "I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect things to go back to how they were. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry, that I regret every word, every action, every moment I made you feel you weren't important." I looked at him in silence. I saw the adult man crying in front of me, but I also saw the boy he had been, the boy who hugged me when he was scared, the boy who told me he loved me before going to sleep. And in that moment, something inside me began to soften. It was not complete forgiveness. It was not forgetting. But it was the beginning of something. A small crack in the wall of pain I had built. David was still standing in front of me, with tears rolling down his face. I remained seated in my armchair, watching him. There were so many emotions inside me at that moment. Pain, disappointment, but also something softer, something that looked like compassion. "Sit down, David," I said. My voice was calm. He hesitated for a moment, as if unsure he had heard correctly. Finally, he sat down on the sofa, his hands clasped between his knees, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I need you to understand something," I continued. "What you did hurt me deeply, not just because of the house. The house is just a place. It hurt me because you came to me with legal documents instead of coming with love, because you saw me as an obstacle instead of seeing me as your mother, because you forgot that I gave you life." David nodded without looking up. His shoulders trembled slightly. "I know, Mum. I know, and I have no excuse. I let greed blind me. I let Emily convince me that we had a right to something that wasn't ours. But the fault is mine. I made the decisions. I was the one who pressured you. I was the one who hired that lawyer without even investigating if I was right." He paused. He wiped his tears with the back of his hand. "When the judge explained that the house was yours from before the marriage, I felt like the world was crashing down on me. Not just because I lost the case, but because I realized what I had tried to do. I tried to take what your parents left you, what was your inheritance, your security, and all for money I didn't even really need." "Why did you do it then, David?" I asked. "Why? If you didn't need it." He looked up for the first time. His eyes were red and swollen. "Because I wanted more. I always wanted more. I was never satisfied with what I had. I saw other people with businesses, with big houses, with money, and I felt like I deserved the same thing. And when Emily started talking about your property, what this house was worth, what we could do with that money, I let that idea consume me." He covered his face with his hands. "I was a fool, a selfish fool who forgot where he came from, who forgot who sacrificed everything for him." The silence that followed was long, heavy, but not hostile. I needed to process his words. I needed to decide if they were genuine or if they were only the result of having lost everything. "David, forgiveness is not something I can give you today," I said. "I can't tell you that everything is fine and that we're going back to how we were, because it's not. What happened changed something between us, something that is going to take a lot of time to repair, if it can be repaired." He nodded with his head bowed. "I understand," he said. "I didn't come expecting you to forgive me. I just came to tell you the truth, to acknowledge what I did, and to ask you that, if someday you can forgive me, you do it. Not for me, but for you, so you can live in peace." There was something in those words that touched me, because he was right. Forgiveness was not for him, it was for me, to free myself from the burden of resentment, from the pain that was eating away at me inside. "I'm going to need time, David," I said. "Time to heal. Time to understand everything that happened. Time to decide if I want you to be part of my life again." He looked up. His eyes showed hope mixed with fear. "I understand," he said. "I'll respect your time. I won't pressure you. I won't show up unannounced. I just want you to know that if someday you decide to give me another chance, I'm going to prove to you that I can be better, that I can be the son you deserved to have." He stood up slowly. He walked toward the door. I accompanied him. Before leaving, he turned to me one last time. "I love you, Mum," he said. "I've always loved you, even though I didn't show it. Even though I did everything wrong, I will always love you." He closed the door softly behind him. I stood at the entrance, looking at the dark wood of the door. I felt something wet on my cheeks and realized I was crying. They were not tears of sadness. They were tears of liberation, of having said what I needed to say, of having heard what I needed to hear. I returned to my kitchen. I sat by the window and looked out into the yard. The flowers were still there. The sun was still shining. Life continued its course despite the pain, despite everything. The following days were quieter. David did not show up again, but he sent me a brief message a week later. It just said, "Thinking of you, Mum. I hope you're doing okay." I did not respond immediately. I let the message sit there for several days. Finally, one afternoon, I wrote back, "I'm doing well. Thank you for asking." It was little, but it was a start. Elizabeth noticed the change in me. She told me one afternoon while we were having tea in my kitchen, "You look lighter, Martha," she said, "as if a weight has been lifted." I smiled faintly. David came to see me. He came to apologize. I don't know if it was genuine or if it was just because he lost everything, but something in me softened when I heard him. "And what are you going to do?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I said. "I'm going to take my time. I'm going to see if his actions match his words. Because words are easy, Elizabeth. The difficult thing is truly changing." My friend nodded wisely. "That's the smartest thing you can do. Don't rush. Let time show you the truth." Weeks passed. Spring settled in completely. My yard was filled with colours, with scents, with life. I spent the mornings there, enjoying the sun, feeling peace slowly return to my life. David sent me occasional messages, never asking for anything, just asking how I was, sharing small things about his day. He told me he had gotten a new job, that he was living alone in a small apartment, that he was trying to put his life in order. I replied briefly, but I did reply, because despite everything, he was still my son. And a part of me wanted to believe he could change, that he could learn from his mistakes. One afternoon, 2 months after the trial, David asked if he could visit me. This time he did it correctly. He asked. He waited for my answer. He did not take anything for granted. I told him yes. He arrived at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. He brought flowers, a simple bouquet of white daisies. My favourites. He had not brought them in years, but he remembered them. "For you, Mum," he said. "For your garden." I took the flowers and smelled them. There was something different about him. Something more humble, more genuine. "Thank you, David," I said. We spent the afternoon talking. Nothing deep, nothing painful, just simple things. He told me about his new job at an accounting firm. I told him about the new plants I had planted. It was strange, like getting to know each other again, like starting from scratch. Before leaving, he looked at me seriously. "I know I still have a lot to prove," he said. "I know words aren't enough, but I'm going to try my best, Mum. I'm going to be better. Because the thing that hurts me the most about all this isn't having lost the case. It's having lost you." His words resonated deeply with me. I did not answer. I just nodded, because I was not ready for more yet. But it was a step, a small step towards something that maybe, someday, could resemble forgiveness. When he left, I sat in my yard with the daisies in a vase next to me. I looked at the sky turning orange with the sunset, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something like hope. I did not know if David would truly change. I did not know if our relationship would ever be repaired. But I knew I had done the right thing. I had defended what was mine. I had maintained my dignity. I had proven that a woman of 69 years old was not weak. She was not an easy victim, and that no matter what happened next, was worth everything. The months that followed were a slow reconstruction. David continued to visit me every 2 weeks. He always asked first. He always arrived at the agreed time. He always brought something small, a freshly baked loaf of bread, some fruit from the farmer's market, flowers for the garden, never anything ostentatious. Just simple gestures that showed he was thinking of me. I received him with courtesy, with caution still, because deep wounds do not heal overnight. And what he had done had left scars that still hurt when I touched them. But there was something different about him. I saw it in his eyes, in the way he spoke to me. There was no longer that arrogance he used to have. There was no longer that sense of superiority. There was humility. There was genuine respect. One summer afternoon, while we were drinking lemonade in the yard, David spoke to me about something I did not expect. "Mum, I started going to therapy, he said, 2 months ago. I looked up in surprise. He was looking at his glass, turning it in his hands. I needed to understand why I did what I did, why I was capable of trying to take your house, why money became more important than you, and I discovered things about myself that I don't like, things that I need to change. He continued speaking in a calm voice. The therapist helped me see that I've always had this need to prove something, to be more, to have more. I think it comes from when Dad died. I felt like I had lost something I was never going to get back, and I tried to fill that void with material things, with success, with money, but it was never enough. He paused. He looked directly into my eyes. And in that process, I forgot the most important thing. I forgot that you were there, that you were always there, that you sacrificed everything for me, and I treated you like you were worth nothing. His words moved me, not because they were perfect, but because they were honest, because they came from a place of true reflection. I'm glad you're working on yourself, David, I said. That's something no one can do for you. Only you can decide what kind of man you want to be. I know, he said, and I want to be someone who makes you proud, even if it takes time, even if it's difficult. I nodded in silence, and for the first time since the trial, I felt that maybe there was hope. Maybe it was possible to rebuild what had been broken. While David worked on his personal redemption, I was also doing my own internal work. Elizabeth had suggested that I write about what I had experienced, to put my emotions on paper, my pain, my healing process. At first it seemed strange to me. I had never been one for writing, but one night, after David left, I took an old notebook I had saved and started writing. I wrote about the day he arrived with the documents, about the humiliation I felt when he treated me like an unimportant old woman, about the fear of losing my home, about the strength I found within myself. And as I wrote, something began to release inside me. The weight became lighter. The pain became more manageable. The words on the paper were like a silent witness to my truth. One afternoon, while I was in the garden, I received an unexpected call. It was Emily. I had not heard anything from her since her visit months ago. Her voice sounded different, more mature, more serene. "Martha, I know I don't have the right to call you," she said, "but I wanted you to know that I'm leaving town. I got a job in another state. A new beginning." She paused before continuing. "I wanted to thank you for not holding more resentment than necessary toward me. When I came to see you that day, I expected you to slam the door in my face. But you listened to me, and that meant more than you can imagine." I sincerely wished her luck. There was no hatred in my heart toward her, only a lesson learned about human nature, about how greed can transform people into unrecognizable versions of themselves. When summer ended, something changed between David and me. It was not a specific moment. It was gradual, like the change of seasons. The conversations became deeper. The visits became more natural. The tension began to dissolve slowly. One evening, while I was preparing dinner, David came into the kitchen. "Can I help you, Mum?" he asked. Those simple words stopped me. It had been years since he had helped me with anything in this house. He had always been the one who arrived, ate, and left. But now he was there, offering his help without me asking for it. "You can chop the vegetables," I said. We worked side by side in silence, only the sound of the knives against the cutting boards. And there was something healing in that simplicity, in sharing a space, in doing something together, without unnecessary words. After dinner, while we were clearing the dishes, David spoke. You know, Mum, I've been thinking a lot about Dad lately, he said, about what he was like, about how he cared for me. And I realized that he never taught me to value material things. On the contrary, he always said that the most important thing was family, love, honesty. He paused with a plate in his hands. And I forgot all that. I forgot his teachings. I forgot what really matters. But I don't want to keep forgetting. I want to honor his memory by being better, by being the man he would have wanted me to be. I felt my eyes well up. My husband had been a good man, an upright man who worked until his last day to give us a good life. And David was right. He would have been disappointed by what his son had done, but he also would have been proud to see him acknowledge his mistakes. Your father would have told you that everyone makes mistakes, I said. But the important thing is to learn from them. And you are learning, David. I can see it. He nodded, his eyes bright. Thank you for not giving up on me, Mum, he said. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to prove that I can change. That night, after David left, I sat in my favorite armchair with a cup of tea. I looked around my house. The walls I knew by heart. The furniture I had chosen carefully over the years. The photographs that told the story of my life. This house had been on the verge of being snatched away. It had been at the center of a legal battle. It had been the cause of a family breakdown. But now, it was returning to what it should have always been. A home, a place of peace, a refuge. And I was returning to who I had always been. Not a victim, not a defenseless old woman, but a strong woman. A woman who knew how to defend what was hers. A woman who could forgive without forgetting. Who could give second chances without being naive. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months. And slowly, very slowly, the relationship between David and me began to heal. It did not go back to how it was before. It would never go back to how it was before. But it became something new. Something more honest, something built on stronger foundations than simple family obligation. David started coming on Sundays to help me with chores around the house. He repaired what was broken. He painted what needed paint. He mowed the lawn. And while he worked, we talked. About life. About his mistakes. About my fears. About our hopes for the future. One afternoon, while he was pruning the bushes in the yard, he asked me something that surprised me. Mum, when I was a kid, was I happy? He asked. I remember that I was, but at some point I stopped being happy, and I don't know exactly when it happened. I just know that I started wanting things instead of wanting moments. When do you think I lost myself? I thought for a moment before answering. I think you lost yourself when you started comparing yourself to others, I said. When you stopped being grateful for what you had and started focusing on what you lacked. When success became more important than peace. He nodded slowly, processing my words. You're right, he said. And now I'm trying to find myself again. To go back to who I was before everything got complicated. I smiled faintly. It's not about going back to who you were, David, I said. It's about becoming who you want to be. And that's something only you can decide. A full year passed since that day in court. A year in which everything changed. A year in which I learned that justice is not always accompanied by immediate satisfaction, but by a long and painful process of healing. It was an autumn afternoon when David came to my house with something different in his hands. They were not flowers. It was not food. It was a small wooden box, hand-carved with delicate details. What is this? I asked. He placed it carefully on the dining table. Something I made for you, he said. I've been taking woodworking classes for the last few months, and I wanted to make something with my own hands, something to show you that I'm truly changing. I opened the box with curiosity. Inside there was a photo frame, also made of wood, and in the frame there was an old photograph that I thought was lost. It was a photo of David when he was 5 years old, sitting on his father's lap, both smiling at the camera. "Where did you find this photo?" I asked. "It was in a box of Dad's things that you had stored in the attic," he replied. "You asked me months ago to go up and look for some tools, and I found it. I thought you would like to have it in a special place." My eyes filled with tears. They were not tears of sadness. They were tears of gratitude, of seeing my son remember where he came from, of honoring his father's memory in a meaningful way. "It's beautiful, David," I said. "Thank you." He smiled shyly. "I want you to know that every day I'm working to be better," he said. "Not just for you, but for me. Because I realized that I can't live being someone I don't respect. And for a long time, I didn't respect myself." We sat in the living room and talked for hours. He told me about his therapy, about the things he was discovering about himself, about how he had learned to value the simple, the genuine, the real. He also told me about his job. He had recently been promoted, not out of excessive ambition, but out of honest effort. And he told me he was saving money, not to buy a big house or to open a business, but to have stability, to feel secure without depending on unrealistic expectations. "And there's something else I want to tell you, Mom," he said. His tone became more serious. "When all this happened, when I lost the lawsuit and I lost Emily, I thought my life was over. I thought I would never recover from the shame, from the failure. But now I understand that it was the best thing that could have happened to me, because it forced me to look in the mirror, to see who I had become, and to decide to change." He paused and took my hand. "And the most important thing I recovered was not dignity or self-respect. It was you. I recovered my mother, and I'm never going to lose you again." I squeezed his hand gently. I had waited so long to hear those words, to feel that they were true. And now that I heard them, I knew they were. The following months were the calmest I had lived in a long time. David continued to visit me regularly, but now our conversations were different. There was no longer tension. There were no longer uncomfortable silences. There was only a real connection between mother and son. Elizabeth noticed the change. She told me one afternoon while we were having coffee at her house. "You look different, Martha," she said. "Lighter, more at peace." I smiled. "I think I'm finally healing," I said. "It doesn't mean I've forgotten what happened, but it means I no longer let that define me. I no longer let the pain consume me." My friend nodded wisely. "That is true forgiveness," she said. "Not forgetting, but letting go. Not erasing the past, but not letting it drag you down." She was right. Forgiveness had not been instantaneous. It had not been easy. It had taken time. Tears, difficult conversations. But it had been worth it. Because now I could look at my son without resentment. I could remember what happened without it hurting me to the core. One spring afternoon, exactly 1 year and a half after the trial, David invited me to walk in the park downtown. It had been years since we had gone there together. When he was a child, I would take him there every Sunday. He would run among the trees while I watched him from a bench. Simpler times. Happier times. We walked slowly along the tree-lined paths. The sun filtered through the leaves, creating patterns of light on the ground. There were families enjoying the good weather, children playing, elderly couples holding hands. David stopped in front of a large tree. It was the same tree where we used to sit when he was little. "Do you remember this place, Mum?" he asked. "How could I forget?" I replied. "We spent many afternoons here. You asked me to tell you stories, and I would make up tales about dragons and princesses." He smiled with nostalgia, and I believed every word, because to me, you were magic. You were the most important person in the world. His voice broke slightly. At some point, I stopped seeing you that way. I stopped valuing you, and I turned you into someone I could take advantage of. But now, after everything that happened, I see you again as I saw you then, as someone magical, as the most important person in my world. He hugged me, and in that hug I felt everything that words could not express. I felt his genuine repentance, his recovered love, his gratitude for a second chance. We sat under the tree as we had years ago, and we talked about life, about what we had learned, about what we still had left to learn. "You know, Mum, the other day I was thinking about the trial," David said, "about how the judge put me in my place. And I realized that day I didn't just lose a legal case. I lost the illusion that I could get things without effort, that I deserved something just for existing. It was humiliating but necessary. Humility is a tough teacher, but effective. And you were my teacher too, because you could have gotten revenge. You could have closed the door on me forever. But you didn't. You gave me space to grow, to change, and that's something I'll never forget." When the sun began to set, we walked back home. David walked me to the door, and before leaving, he hugged me again. "I love you, Mum," he said. "And thank you for everything, for raising me, for defending what was yours, for teaching me the most important lesson of my life, for forgiving me when I didn't deserve it." "I love you too, son," I said. I watched him walk away down the street until he disappeared around the corner. I walked into my house and closed the door softly. I looked around. Everything was in its place. Everything was still mine. My home. My refuge. My inheritance. I sat in my favorite armchair and closed my eyes. I thought about the entire journey, the pain I had lived, the battles I had fought, the victories I had won, and I felt a profound peace, a peace that came from knowing I had done the right thing, that I had defended my dignity without losing my humanity. That night, before going to sleep, I wrote a final reflection in my notebook. The words flowed easily, as if they had been waiting to come out for a long time. Today I learned that justice is not always loud. Sometimes it is silent. Sometimes it comes in the form of documents that prove your truth. Sometimes it arrives in a courtroom where a wise judge recognizes your right. I learned that a woman's strength is not in shouting. It is in standing firm when everyone expects you to give in. It is in defending what is yours without apologies. It is in forgiving without forgetting. And I learned that a mother's love is complex. It can be broken, it can be hurt, but it can also heal if both parties are willing to do the work. I closed the notebook and turned off the light. I lay down in my bed, in my house, in my home that no one could take from me. And I slept with the tranquility of someone who knows they did the right thing, of someone who knows that their story, although painful, ended with dignity. Because in the end, it was not just about a house. It was about respect, about justice, about proving that a woman of 69 years old is not invisible. She is not weak. She is not an obstacle to be removed. She is a silent warrior. She is accumulated wisdom. She is serene strength. She is unbreakable dignity. And that no one can ever take from you, not even your own son. Life continued after that. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months. David kept visiting me. Our relationship continued to heal, and I continued living in my house, tending my garden, enjoying my peace. Because this is my story, the story of a woman who defended what was hers, who stood firm when everyone expected her to fall, who forgave without forgetting, who loved without being naive. And if my story can teach other women anything, it is this. Never let anyone make you feel less. Never let your age be used as a weakness. Never let family be an excuse for abuse. Because you too are silent warriors. You too deserve respect. You too deserve justice. And when the time comes to defend what is yours, do it with your head held high, with documents in hand, with the truth on your side. Because justice, though slow to arrive, always comes. And when it does, it is sweet. It is healing. It is liberating. This is my story. And now it is yours too.